So nice to see everyone coming in. I think we'll just give everyone a minute. One thing would be amazing is if we could just rename ourselves to the name of our center so we can see who's here and who we know and who we're close to and all of those great things. And while we're waiting for people to do that and come in, I'll just take the opportunity to pitch our RCC retreat that's coming up at Mount Madonna on November 10th to 12th. It's filling up, which is really amazing. And so if we'd love to see everyone who feels like they can make it. Mount Madonna is it's near Santa Cruz, California. And I think that I have the first content meeting tomorrow, but what we're trying to do with content is make sure that we have a number of provocative discussions for retreat centers to think about all the pieces of our work. So I think it'll be really fun. All right. I think we'll let some folks pop in as we continue. But I think I would love to get started. Um, so thanks so much for joining us. This is the second time I've done this presentation because the first time we did it, we were not totally technically set up very well. And so I ended up doing it to a small group because folks couldn't get into the Zoom room. So I'm really happy to be doing it again. Um, so my name's Peter Wrinch. I'm the program director of RCC. Um, I come to this role after leading Hollyhock Retreat Center in British Columbia, Canada for 7 years, from 2017 to 2024. Um, as we all know, very interesting years to lead a retreat center through COVID and a number of other things. So while I was at Hollyhock, um, we were able to triple the philanthropic revenue. Um, and one of the sort of insights I had is that this philanthropic line is the way that I like to think about it. I think is available to all retreat centers. Um, but you know, during my time at Hollyhock and over the last years, I've been working as a consultant with retreat centers on philanthropic strategy. I've come up with somewhat a bit of a framework that I like to follow. And so that's what we're going to work through today. And my hope is that it's participatory. There's two exercises where we'll talk to each other. But if there is if there's something that I say that you want to know more about, try to get my attention. It'll be a little hard for me to watch the chat, I think, but maybe just come off mute and interrupt me. That would be wonderful. Um, so I think with that, I'm going to get started and gonna share my screen. Okay, I think it's here. Can everyone see that? Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah. So, okay, great. Um, so I wanted to start with just the Retreat Center collaboration and our three core values. So that's the power of place and space, the interplay of inner and outer work, and a commitment to universal flourishing. So everything that we're doing in these community calls, in our retreats, in all the ways that we interact across the Retreat Center network, you know, are based on these values. And so, whether we're talking about business operations or whether we're talking about philanthropic strategy, it's all grounded in these values. It's not philanthropic strategy for the sake of philanthropic strategy. It's so that our network can flourish based on a commitment to universal flourishing, an interplay of inner and outer work, and the power of place and space. So we're all on the right call, purpose and fundraising for retreat centers. Anyone in the wrong call, I won't be offended if you pull out now, but this is what we're talking about. So I wanted to start with a reading from a Buddhist teacher that we used to feature at Hollyhock, named Michael Stone, and he was based in Toronto. And I'd love for you to just join me in having us open the call this way. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable. Put your feet on the floor, ground into your chair. Know that the earth is below us, supporting us. And we'll start with this unrehearsed activity. So this is called unrehearsing. Healing is reaching into the spaces where new sentences are put together. The breath does the reaching. New stories emerge. Rocks, legs, hearts, relationships, water. These are all stories we tell. Can you see a rock without seeing it through language? Can you love another person without reducing them to old sentences? These questions keep me fascinated with practice, which is essentially the undoing of clinging to old narratives. And as narratives unbuckle, what emerges is compassion, not just empathy, resonating with another's suffering, but movement towards doing something, unrehearsed activity, a new response. Although people don't often articulate it this way, one of the things that meditation practice is doing is teaching you how to use your imagination in new ways. When you're sad or when your issues are right in your face, one of the problems is there's a failure of imagination. You don't have a way to frame what you're experiencing in a bigger, more spacious way. In a way, neuroses is just when there is no space around what you're perceiving. It's filling up the view. Part of meditation practice is changing your focus so that you can see what you're stuck on differently and experience what you're experiencing with a much larger background.
Hi, Peter. Could I
Yes.
ask? Could I ask maybe if you could put the name of the author of that into the chat, because
I will for sure. Yeah, so that is Michael Stone, and the book I read it from is called The World Comes to You. Unfortunately, Michael passed away in the opioid crisis in 2017 or 18 or 19. But this book is, and he led a Buddhist practice in Toronto, and his books are available. And I bring up unrehearsed activity because I realize that sometimes, entering into philanthropy and philanthropic strategy is new muscles for all of us. And in this presentation, I'll talk about some of the new muscles that I built while at Hollyhock and in the last year working with different centers. So I wanted to start with some insights that I've had in the last, well, I want to say last decade, but certainly in the last year. Oh, and just for folks, I can share this presentation, so you don't need to take notes on it, but I can share it. We can share it after. But the 5 insights that I feel strongly about is that the money is out there. We're living in challenging times and strange times, but there is no lack of money. The second insight is, and it sort of goes with the third insight, which we'll get into, but that a lot of centers operate on what I look at as a patron model. You have a few major donors who maybe have experienced transformation at the center, or they've been involved for a long time, and that's fine. But that's the model, and I think it's important to name. When I came into Hollyhock, we had about four patrons. We had four patrons that had experienced some form of transformation at the center and were could afford to give large amounts of money. The second model is an impact model, and we'll sort of focus on that today, but it's like, what is the impact your center is making in the world? And it moves away, it allows you to open up to more funders, particularly more institutional funders, whether those are grants, family offices, or foundations. But it's really about what impact are you making in the world? Not just we're a great place and we exist. The fourth insight that I've had over the last little while is that coherent purpose is often the biggest barrier to being able to fundraise. We'll get to this a little more. And then finally, retreat center activities. The activities we do day in and day out represent our purpose and action. And it has been my experience, both as a CEO of Hollyhock and working with a number of other centers, is that there's often some incoherence between what we say we are and what we do. Okay. So I wanted to challenge us to think about philanthropy as social investments. So whether you think about a major donor, like a wealth holder, or a foundation, it has been my experience that a lot of those folks have a portfolio, if you will, of social investments they're making. And like any portfolio, like if you think about the stock market, there will be a number of investments that are sure bets, that you feel very secure that if you put this money in, you will get the impact or the outcome you're looking for. There will be a handful of investments that are a little risky. You're not sure you'll get the outcome. And then there will be a smaller minority of investments that are totally risky, that you're really not sure you're going to get the outcome. And so I just wanted to outline some of the investments that philanthropists often make. A lot of philanthropists will invest in frontline social justice organizations. So this may be, depending on where they fit, but this might be people advocating for the rights of homeless people, the rights of LGBTQ folks, the rights of children, the rights of animals, this type of thing. That's your frontline social justice. They may be investing in, sort of frontline service delivery orgs, so food banks, homeless shelters, things that are not systemic in nature, but are serving a need. They may make political investments in political parties. And then retreat centers are a type of social investment too. But I think why I have this slide in here and why this is like insightful, why I have this insight is that we have to understand that we're one of many investments philanthropists are making or foundations are making. The way I like to think about it is that you have a Venn diagram, right? You have a social investor who is looking for some sort of outcome, and then you have a retreat center that is creating outcomes. So I can give you an example, and I'll use Hollyhock because I'm most familiar with it. In my time, and I haven't been there for a year and a bit, so it's changing, it's different. But in my time, we thought about, connection. Like we were trying to build connection to ourselves, to each other, and to the natural world. And so we would look for social investors, philanthropists, who had that same desired outcome. Does that make sense to folks? I'd love just like any reactions. I only see a few of you here. Let's see if I do this. I can see more of you. But yeah, like any thumbs up, any reactions. Is this making sense? This frame of social investor. Yeah, seeing some head nods, seeing some reactions. Someone give me like an exciting emoji. Give me an exciting emoji. Oh, I like that one. Nice, nice. Okay, okay. Because we're going to keep using this frame as social investor, and so I want to keep going with it. So over the last year, I've been working with centers on this like philanthropic strategy, or like I like sometimes call it philanthropic line item. And what will happen is someone will call me and they'll say, "Hey, Peter, can you come help me? We heard you're really good at raising money." And I'll say, "Sure. How much do you want to like? What's your what's your plan?" And they'll say, "We want to raise $1 million in the next 3 months." And I'm like, "Nope, no, thank you." Um, but then sometimes when it does seem realistic, I'll get involved. And what I notice right away is that they're focused on the outer rim of this chart. If folks are focused on the outer rim of this chart, we want to fundraise. But the center, which is purpose, is unclear. And then the activities are incoherent. So in my experience, and even in my personal experience, so I was an ED of an advocacy organization, I worked in politics, and I worked at Hollyhock. If I use politics as a good example, politics are often the purpose is very clear. Someone wants to get elected. But it's the activities they do in the world where the incoherence creeps in, or the things they say. And so they want to get elected, they're running on a platform, but their activities don't make sense with what they say they're for. Fundraising becomes very hard because people feel and see that incoherence. Okay? So as retreat centers, it's like if we say we're for something, like I can give an example. If we say we are for, let's like just pick an example. Well, I'll use the Hollyhock one again. If we say we're for connection to natural world, but then we're running weddings, it is incoherent. It is incoherent. And then I go to fundraise. Someone says, "Well, why would I don't understand. Like you say you're this, but then you're running weddings. I don't get it." And and I say in my head, "Well, it's because we need some earned revenue and we want to do this thing." But the price of that incoherence kills your philanthropic strategy. So for me, a purpose is a bold and precise reason why you exist. And this is so important that leadership truly exists. Because social investors, philanthropists are savvy. They can sniff out bullshit. And if you're incoherent, they sniff it out. And I'm glad they do, because it keeps us real, you know? Your activities are what you do. And one of the like most ridiculous, ruthless ways that I'll like say to someone, "Tell me about your activities," is show me your Google Calendar. That will tell me what you do. If you say you're this, and then I look at your Google Calendar and you're doing a whole bunch of different, you're not that. You're actually not being honest with yourself. And a very quick look at your Google Calendar will tell you how you spend your time and what you do. And then fundraising is the last thing. And it's just enrolling people into that purpose and activities. And it's the last thing, it's tactical. There's no secret. So I wanted to just run you through, since like we're getting real here, I just wanted to run you through shit I used to say in meetings, um, and what it actually means. So I don't know, by a show of hands, who's been in this meeting? Who has said, does anyone know any billionaires? Who has been in that meeting? I have led that meeting. Well, here's the translation of what that means. I'm grasping at straws and I have no strategy. Um, so it's a mark, right? If you're in that meeting, you're in the wrong meeting. Because the truth is, everyone knows billionaires, but billionaires are savvy. They don't want to give to you just because you know them. They want to understand what you're doing in the world. Should I used to say, I wish they would just fund us because we're awesome. Can't they see that we're just awesome? Who's been in that meeting? Come on, I know you all have. Um, so translation, I don't want to do the purpose work required to inspire people to invest. I'm not willing. There's probably tons of barriers. Maybe there's, uh, you know, discord in the organization. Maybe you can't find alignment. Maybe there's a group of founders that don't understand why we need to fundraise. Maybe there's a group of millennials who are, there's all sorts of reasons why we don't do this. All of them are real, but they limit our ability to fundraise. This is one of my classic favorites. Our retreat center means so many things to so many different people. How could we ever say one thing? Um, we're trying to be all things to everyone, which means we're nothing to nobody. Um, and I think that it's so hard, but it's like one of the things I remember someone gave me this advice, very smart person gave me this advice at Hollyhock, and it was so hard to change, but she was like, you do this, you're trying to be all things to everyone, you're nothing to nobody, you need to do this and articulate it and own it. So, um, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to take 5 minutes for us to jot down our retreat center's purpose, the deepest purpose that we can articulate, right? It should be easy. We're going to take 5 minutes, grab your pencils. But here's the trick. You can't use any of these words. Because if you use these words, you're just the same as everyone else. So I need you to take 5 minutes to write your purpose, but none of these words. Okay? And oh, by the way, we're gonna go into breakout groups, so you're gonna share it with folks. So I'm gonna start a timer now, but I think it's gonna take these words off the screen. But you kind of get my point. It's like, don't use the words that everyone else is using. Okay? So there we go. Let's take 5 minutes just to write down our purpose. And remember, it's a bold and precise reason why you exist that your leadership truly believes in. Okay, so we're gonna finish it's 54 past the hour where I am. So
Morning in progress.
And have a really clear and solid purpose, but there's also another element about how you're able to articulate that, or your people that are fundraising, how they articulate it. And then we also talked a little bit about, sources of funding, and not like chasing after things just because they're giving money, but being thoughtful about it. So that was what our group was doing. But it was nice, to be like, wow, for people who just like, here's my purpose. It's really has been thought out, and it's clear, so yeah, good stuff.
awesome. Thanks, Sarah Lynn. that resonate for other folks? What else went on in the groups?
Some people, in our group, we were talking about if we felt that the message was good, but we don't have the actual systems or the structure or the technology and such to build an ongoing, constant interaction to bring the awareness up and to draw the people in, and then how to handle that relationship. So it's kind of tactical.
Mm. Scott, I just have a question there. Do you mean like um, you you might have a clear purpose, but you don't have the tactical knowledge or technology to attract donors? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, you want to, so one of my questions is there's, let's say, for instance, you have your own, I'll just take IMCW
Yeah.
for now, because they've been around for 20 some years. They have a database. They know people that are in the database, but they don't know what the value of those people are. So let's talk about, they just acquired Seven Oaks. So I have zero data. So I have to start from scratch, which is I'm going out to find and to attract people and try and regroup and gather all the contacts of people that know of Seven Oaks, have participated in Seven Oaks,
Yeah.
want to be a part of it. But then I have to have a system that puts them into, it's you're developing over years, trying to basically say, hey, I need to email them. I need to send out the newsletter. I need to be consistent. I need
Yeah.
to invite them into events. Is it a house party? Is it, a free weekend? Is it a volunteer event? How do you get all these integration and touch points so that ultimately you actually understand what their purpose and their value in life is that they want to share and partake in? So anyway,
Totally.
that's a lot.
Yeah. You just gave me like a sweet idea for another community call, which is like tactical fundraising. I mean, basically what you were just talking about there was like a stewardship model for our constituency, really. And so like I can tell you that a number of the retreats that I'm working with, or like what we did at Hollyhock is, we had a list, I'm certain that we all have some form of list, whether it's 500 people or 500,000 people, mostly people who have experienced our offering. And what we found when I first got to Hollyhock in 2017, we did, because I came from political fundraising, I knew that a lot of what Scott said, that we had to really speak to people where they're at about our offering. And so we looked at everyone who had ever donated more than $5,000, and we traced them and we said, like, what experiences had they had with us? And it was incredibly clear that they had had multiple experiences on land. So no one who gave us 5,000 or plus had not been on land. And so we started to develop what we called like our, very tactical, but donor profile. And it was we knew that if we saw a wealth holder in community who we knew that was somewhat interested in our center, we would make sure that we invited them to come to events before we went and asked them for 5,000, 10,000, 100,000. And so I think what Scott's bringing up is like, how do we do that for our center? So we will do a community call on tactical fundraising in the new year. Anything else come up that we haven't talked about yet did people enjoy talking to people or talking?
Yeah, we had a great group. I think the tactical fundraising thing sounds like a great idea because it was something that applied to several of us in our breakout, which was that the retreat center is one aspect of a bigger organization, or in our case, a Commonweal fiscal sponsor relationship, or it's one part of the works. And so sometimes a purpose statement is necessary and a good general thing, but different donors are attracted to different aspects of the work that's needed and the funding that's needed. And so how to kind of break that out. And as you say, Peter, that was one of my strategies for sure, is like being a new fundraiser at an organization is great because you can just introduce yourself, go down the line and see who's given more than 5. And for me in the past organizations, that's led to some of the biggest gifts, just figuring out, what are people's affinities for the work and points of connection. And then you have that in your Rolodex when a project that applies surfaces.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true, Mary. It's like it's so fun being the new fundraiser or the new, because you don't have any of you can just introduce yourself to people and you get to
Totally.
hear all anew. Yeah. And Mary, you gave me a very soft like movement to our next topic, which is like activities. So I'm going to bring my screen back and we're going to keep going here. So I love this like Batman quote. I wish I could like play the little thing, but it's like I I I think in the last year I've been like I guess what I would say is that I've worked in social change movements for 20 years and I've heard a lot of visionary purpose statements. But where I think incoherence shows up, as I've mentioned, is it's like what we do. So we can say we're a bunch of things, but this is why I go back to the Google Calendar. It's like, what are you actually doing? And is it coherent? So one of the ways like I've started to think about purpose in action is through activities. So we all just did a purpose we just did a purpose activity or defined our purpose. But now it's like, well, how is the purpose actualizing? How is it happening in the world? And for each of these activities, who are we going to talk to and bring in? Okay, so activity is purpose in action. So I'm going to come back to this social investor and your retreat center, and we have this like Venn diagram where we have some overlap. And this is for excuse the like crass capitalism term, but this is for like prospecting. We've got some outcomes, and this social investor seems interested. But where we actually want to be is more like this. This is a when we see an overlay like this is a much warmer connection. And so I used the example of depolarization. We're living in a time of incredible polarization, particularly in the US, but here in Canada as well. And so I know a social investor, let's say, that is the reason they get up in the morning is they want to use all their excess capital to fund connection or depolarization work. Well, it just so happens that Retreat Center X, that's one of their fundamental programs. And so this connection is a very strong one. And I would say that this connection based on outcome or impact goes directly against does anyone know any billionaires? Because you actually have a meaningful connection. So I want to take another 5 minutes and jot down. So we've worked on our purpose, and I want to jot down our core activities and list your top 5 as they align with your stated purpose. Okay? What are you actually doing day in and day out? And how is that coherent as purpose in action? Okay, maybe we'll take we won't use 5 minutes. It's 11:24 where I am. So let's go to 28. So about 4 minutes to jot down how your activities represent your purpose in action. So as we were waiting here, I was thinking another thing. Sometimes it helps, depending on how we're wired, to think about the activities we're doing that don't align with purpose as well. Here's some activities that we're doing that don't align with purpose. All right. So I'm gonna throw us back in breakout rooms, and I'd love, again, if we just take about 10 minutes there'll be different rooms, so you meet new people, and then just share how your activities line up with your purpose. All right. Here we go. Have fun in there. All right, everyone, welcome back. Welcome back. So I'd love to just ask the same question. How was that for everyone? What sort of lessons, what sort of insights did we glean? Feel free to just come off mute or use the raise hand or however you'd like, but I'd love to hear how trying to map your activities to your purpose was for y'all.
I'm going to say first, Peter, it was such a pleasure having you one-on-one. I took advantage of that.
Samuel, it was
So I
wonderful
was
having you
blessed.
one-on-one. Yeah. Yeah. Since Samuel brought up our conversation, I'll say that one thing that came up for me that I wanted to share for the group is, so there's a reason why I used the word purpose and not vision or mission. We all write vision, like for me, I'll just say 20 years in this type of work, I'm really good at writing bullshit mission statements. But purpose is deeper. Purpose is why you exist and your leadership believes it. It's not something that you put on a wall and goes away. And this is why when we start talking about activities, I actually believe this is where the rubber hits the road. Because this is purpose in action. So Samuel and I had a lovely conversation about that. What else came up for folks?
Well, a couple of us decided that, am I on mute? No.
No,
A
you're
couple
good.
of us decided that food is really an important thing. It's not exactly our mission, but it conveys so much and attracts so much that even though it isn't the main thing, we just two of us happen to have that be an important thing in our centers or
Thanks so
valuable.
much, Linda. Linda, I'm gonna poke you a little bit. Tell me how much it means. Like, give me one more line about like
Yeah,
why.
so one line I shared was that somebody in one of the retreats that I led in the opening circle on Friday evenings, we asked people like, "Oh, and what brought you here?" And one person said, "Well," she said, "I kind of thought we thought you might be a cult. But then when we read about your food and your facility, we decided that maybe it's not and we would come." So that's a strong one, but yeah.
Nice. Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Linda. What else was going on in the groups?
Maybe I can raise a question that has come up for us, is that I think we've got a very well-defined purpose and we're working the activities aligned with the purpose. That is not the hang up. The hang up is that, and we've invited philanthropic funders in who understand that purpose and have got us where we are. We're a relatively new retreat center space. The kicker is that our purpose and alignment does not necessarily equate to dollars in terms of activities that people will be able to contribute. So we support with our retreat center a lot of nonprofit staff and volunteers in rest and recovery programs who are suffering from acute burnout. So we have philanthropists, for instance, who will step in and say, that is important. You take care of those people that are taking care of our communities will be stronger because of that. You can't do that 100% of your time. So the other activities that we try to ensure our values aligned in the organization, they tend not to be money-making activities. So when we keep all of our activities aligned specifically with purpose, we end up giving and spending a ton of time doing grant writing and a ton of time, with relationship development, as opposed to being in the work with our community. We have to fill the bucket all of the time. So I'm just curious if others maybe are in a space where you're so purpose aligned that it's difficult to have multiple revenue streams, and what that means for this conversation.
Thanks so much, Jen.
I can.
Yeah,
Oh,
Linda, go ahead.
One of the challenge, we're looking at this challenge of multiple revenue streams right now because we have a very expensive property. And so the retreats that we have are expensive. And especially right now with the economy seeming, or the uncertainty, we do have a decline in enrollment. But our challenge with generating multiple streams of revenue is we just have so few people here that a few of us are doing everything. And so it's hard to branch out, although we're working on it.
Thanks, Linda. Any other like responses to Jen's comments? So the way that I heard it is like very purpose aligned activities line up, but it's hard to continue as a result. It's like a constant filling the bucket, as Jen said, as opposed to doing other activities with community. Does that resonate for other folks? Maybe not. Okay, then I'm going to shift direction a little bit. Yeah, this is kind of my last round at this is like what else was coming up in the activities conversation. And maybe here's a specific question. Was it easy to map your activities to purpose? Did anyone feel like this was incredibly easy, except Jen, who it seemed really easy for?
Yeah.
Scott, was that you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's hard depending on most. I think from the chats, we're also under resourced that everything we do is basically there's no fat. There's just everybody's got something to do, and it keeps the retreats going, and yeah, so there's not a lot of fat.
Got it. Yeah. Was it very hard for someone to map activities to purpose? Did anyone really struggle with it? No, super easy for everyone, it appears. All right, well let's talk about what comes next. All right. So part of the reason why I start with purpose and activities is what I said at the beginning, is that I often like end up in rooms where people are like very focused on the last part of it, which is identify funders and start asking. And they're sort of lost in the purpose and activities, lost on those steps. And so what I've been spending the last year doing is really focusing on those two things so that when we get to the identifying funders and start asking, we're standing on a very strong foundation to do so. And so the way that I think about that is really about getting real with yourself, getting real with your organization. And for some of you on this call, you're already there. You're very real about, and so it requires that third step, which is like identify funders and start asking. But there's some folks on the call that need to do that work of getting real. And so, and I want to draw your attention to the amount of percentage I put to this. That is at over 50% of the work is getting real. Because that's where it will sink you. This is my take. That's where it will sink you. I think the next part is determining your funding model. There may be, a number of retreat centers on this call that are much more, they're much better served by a patron model. I would think that this sort of, my gut is this leans a little bit more to more spiritual centers, but centers that are part of a lineage and are part of a larger community, whether that's an international community or a community around them, that they have a community of people who've experienced the transformation of that land and programming, and they can identify in that community of people, people who are wealth holders. This is sort of going back to what Scott was talking about, and I will commit now to running a tactical fundraising community call in the new year on this. Is like, how do you look through your database? What tools do you use? How do you build like a proper stewardship and engagement plan? And then so that's for a patron model. And then there's other retreat centers that are going to be more focused on outcomes. And I'll just use Firelock just because Jen brought it up. It's like when you're serving not-for-profits or social impact leaders or first responders, there probably are patrons that are available to fund this, but there are also more what I would call institutional funders. Although I'm saying this out loud, and I know that Jen has told me that in Nova Scotia there are fewer institutional funders than I am used to in British Columbia. Jen, I heard, yeah. So, but I think when you're looking at a service delivery as you're part of an infrastructure, possibly a bioregional infrastructure that is supporting people in that bioregion, that to me speaks stronger to an impact model of fundraising, which is like for institutional funders, like in my case, around here would be things like the Vancouver Foundation, McConnell Foundation, like the large foundations that are around you. And one of the benefits that folks on the call who are from the US have is that there's more money. There's 10 times more money in the US in philanthropy than there is in Canada. Yeah. So that I'm gonna stop sharing. That's kind of the end of my presentation. I think there was one more slide that was just like our RCC team's faces, which we don't need to focus on. But I would love, just like we have about 9 minutes left in the call, I would love to just open it up to hear anything that's like popping for you, anything that's like top of mind. Especially if you haven't spoken into the room, no pressure, but this is your opportunity. What's been resonant for you in this call? Yeah, love to hear. What's worked, what hasn't worked as well.
I think what worked for me, not coming anymore from a center, but working with centers and having my own, as an HR consultant, actually the whole purpose and activities, I started to map it out, like just my life and my work. Like how is that aligned? Like what activities am I doing as a human, as a consultant? Like are they aligned and are they not? So I was like, this is interesting. Did not think I was gonna walk away with that. I'll have more questions for you, but I'll see it, Mama Donna. I was like,
Yeah.
Peter, ask questions.
Yes, if anyone was on the call yesterday, Tatiana is running a monthly session for RCC called Tea with Tatiana on HR questions, and it was amazing yesterday. And Tatiana will be, I think, back online early November 4th, but we'll also be at our RCC retreat at Mount Madonna on November 10th to 12th.
But even just taking it to any retreat center or any organization I work with, that would be my first question. How is your activities aligning with your purpose? And I was like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah. I will tell you that it is very hard to fundraise if your activities do not align with your purpose. I'm not saying it's impossible. You can do it, but it is a grind. And fundraising is hard anyways, so it will burn you out if you don't have that alignment. Yeah. Other things? What's popping for folks? What's going on?
Jennifer has a lot going on, but she's muted. Like
Totally.
a lot.
Come on, Jen, unmute. Tell us what's going on.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, we're a relatively new facility, and so our options at the time were build the infrastructure related to gathering spaces or build the infrastructure relating to housing. Could not do both of those at the same time. And the conversation we had was if we started by building accommodations for longer term time phase learning, that's all very important. But we would then have to convince people that our purpose is actually X. Because on its face, while building the infrastructure of housing, we would probably have done things like let that become a tourism kind of driver in the area so that we could put some money in the bank to build the gathering spaces. So we chose that purpose alignment first. Like, we'll figure out the rest of the details by housing people elsewhere. We really need to do this work right now. This is what the world needs. And having that purpose alignment has meant we did not start with money in the bank. We started with a need constantly to generate grant revenue and or alternatives to create or remove the barriers for people accessing the programming. And we didn't have a model that sustains itself initially other than through grant funded programming. So the challenge of that purpose orientation has been like lack of cash in the bank. That was the gist. Like, still really good. Great story to tell. No immediate cash in the bank being the barrier to growth at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Jen. One of the things that like pops for me when you say that is a lot of retreat centers get stuck in this, like, we have a purpose, but we'll do a whole bunch of other things for earned revenue. And, you know, I always remember this story that the founder of Hollyhock told me. He was like, you know, they started Hollyhock in 1982. They wanted to create this like experimental living farm. And then he's like, but then we looked around and go, how are we going to pay for these roofs? And so we started, you know, this was his words, not mine, selling workshops. And then he said at some point that impulse took over the vision. And it became, we were just totally in service to what I now reference as a B2C model, like a business to consumer model. And the purpose just whittled. And so I think you're like in the exact opposite circumstances, like where you came out real, and then there's a number of retreat centers like this where come out really strong on purpose, but then have to scramble to fill the coffers because the earned revenue strategy, which is a trap in itself, you know, is not there. So it's not, it's like there's tension in both, I want to say. Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, I would love to close us with just one more reading by Michael Stone, just because I want to honor that we're all in this like very sacred, hard work. And, you know, I said a lot of things today. It's very easy for me to say from sitting in this little studio on Bowen Island. And I know what it's like to be a CEO or the person responsible. And it's hard. And so I just wanted to end us with a quick reading called Unexpected Altars. So again, if we just get to a comfortable position, put our feet on the floor. Here we go. In 2012, I went to Japan. One day I went on a long hike through the mountains to some Shinto temples. I got to one temple and really had to pee, but I couldn't find a restroom anywhere. So I finally asked someone, is there a restroom somewhere? And they pointed downstairs. I went downstairs. The stairs were stone and went down into the mountain, very, very deep, and it was so dark. When I reached the bottom, there were thousands of candles lit, thousands. This is where they kept the small porcelain urns of ashes from all the villagers in the neighborhoods around the mountain who had died. They sat here in this basement. There was a caretaker, a Shinto priest, whose job was to keep all the candles lit. At the end of the hall, there was an altar. Buddhist altars, especially Shinto altars, usually have a textile hanging in such a way that you can't see the face of the deity unless you bow down really low and look up. So I did what I usually do when I see an altar. I went to light some incense and bow. But this altar, when I looked up, had a round mirror so that instead of a deity, I saw my own face. I began crying. What am I bowing down to? My own life. It's the punchline of this practice. At the end of the day, it's just you, and you grow into your own life. I never did find the restroom. Thank you all. Great to see you. I hope a number of you will join us at the RCC retreat at Mount Madonna, November 10th till 12th. I think we only have about 5 to 7 spots left. And would love to see you all there in person. Thank you.